I'm Jan Triplett. I'm so glad you're here today, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo of 2022. Today we have a really special program that we had to postpone because of the weather. Dave Nave is going to be our guest mentor talking about framing your project and leveraging context before creating action plans.
Okay. I learned this technique working for a very large company. And what I found that I really liked about it was the group was a bunch of engineers, and they're working on a business problem, and there were usually a hostile environment between, and engineers love to argue. So, um, and I found this was fascinating by having them mainly like Anne wants to, Dr. Suckerfus wants to talk about. It's the psychological effect, the fact that you can bring these hostile groups and people together and to focus on something. So, and this comes from an area called value management, but I find that project managers love this stuff because it's a very good opportunity to, during the project launch, to help bring groups together. And I was thinking about Genevieve, who's usually a regular member of this group, but she does the rebuilds kitchens and houses and does remodeling. And this would be a good opportunity for like her to bring all the different skills trades together for a couple hours or a half a day, and to meet the client and to understand what's going on from the big picture. So I call this framing your project, leveraging context before creating action plans, because everybody likes to go out and make plans first. It's the first thing they do. They want to go out and do things. And on the left here is a crowd with tools. And this is what you find out is I've been doing process improvement and TQM, and before that, all the stuff, all this improvement activities in industry, in industrial settings actually. And they all go out with a bunch of tools. Everybody's got tools, and they want to apply the tool to the situation. And what was different about this one is that it actually brings the group together, and you create a common understanding, and then move forward. So here are 3 examples of where this thinking has worked well. One of them is refurbishment of the New York City school buildings. It used to take 8.5 years, and they went through this process and brought all the skilled trades together, and now it takes 3 years, which is actually kind of fascinating because it only takes 5 years to build it from scratch. So before, they'd have been better off if they just tore down the building and started over. It'd be faster. And it was used extensively on creating the 787 airplane that has just come out. And that was actually, I was working on that project when I actually learned this methodology. On a more individual note, one of my colleagues had a fire in his house, and this is not his house. This is not the fire. This is just a pretty picture of a fire, a residential fire. And he used this methodology to evaluate what's going on, what's needed. And he actually got the insurance company to pay 50% more for the repair of his house. So it does have many applications. This is a screenshot of my homepage, and this is what I'm working on now. This is not me, but I finally decided that what I do is I improve confidence in how businesses operate. And I go with smoother operations, integrating and balancing business structure. These are for, like I said, larger organizations. But if you're doing an entrepreneur and you plan on growing the company, you're going to be facing these in the future and manage effectively. So I start to call myself a guide as opposed to a consultant, because it's the ultimate responsibility of the owner of the company to make business decisions. I can't make those decisions for them. Although the jobs I turn away seem to be of people who want me to take over making decisions, business decisions that they should actually be making. So what's different about this methodology is we how you think about things makes a big difference. And what this workshop, it's actually from a workshop, what it does is it asks provocative questions. It helps forge this hostile group into a high performing team, and so that they can take deliberate action instead of arguing about which methodology to use or which tool's better, mine's better than yours, whatever. They can take a deliberate action. They have better understanding. There's 2 deliverables. There's some contact information for me if you want to contact me. Now I'm going to jump right to the end, the deliverable of what you're going to see. So don't be shocked what you see. But I want you to know this is where we're going. If this is how you get there. The team does concerns and expectations, which is a good way for, as Dr. Ann talks about, well, probably knows about in facilitation and psychology, it helps people be heard. If you put up a chart and start to collect their concerns and what their expectations are. There's an opportunity in problem definition. We then identify goals. Now this is just what the group that's assembled in the room has determined what the goals are and what they think they know about it. This makes it very important to get the right people in the room to work on this framing project. If you don't have the right people there, the answers are going to be different. So then we can identify constraints. We have some attributes. We define attributes. We weight the attributes, scale them, and then we create this diagram, the star diagram, that is the end result of all of this information. Now I have a few minutes left. I'm going to, if it's all right, with your permission, I'm going to drag you what a friend of mine from Texas used to call it is face down through the cactus. So I'm going to go through these one at a time, explain them a little bit more if you don't mind. It'll help you understand things better. But this is the end result. This is what you're going to get. You have 8 attributes, and these are rated. These are identified in the order of importance. So whatever this is, and oh, by the way, if you look at these numbers and you look at what I have on here, these are not made up, but they're combined. One of the issues that I found doing these workshops is with large corporations is they consider this proprietary information. So I had to obfuscate, whatever. I had to muck over some stuff so that it's not real. You can't trace it back to where it is. But what you have here is a star with the important attributes around the outside. As you go around clockwise, they become less and less important. The red line is the estimate of where we are now. And then what this does is set you up so that if you make any changes, if you propose activities, you want to do anything different, you can see what effect, or you can predict best you can. Predictions are what? Best guesses of how this might have changed these attributes. Where can you take stuff? Where can it might deteriorate, like in G. You see we have a high performance in G. But if we make a change that reduces the performance level of G, but increases the performance level of A, that might be beneficial to the company. Don't know. So, but it gives you a better idea about what the change or what the effect the change is going to have on the performance of the organization, of the project, actually.
Dave, so what is ROLT?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. There's a whole sheet on
Oh, sorry.
definitions.
Sorry. Okay.
It's reorder lead time.
Okay. Thanks.
But that's one of the things yeah. So we're going to go through each one of these. Again, this is the concerns and expectations. This is what you collect at the beginning of the workshop to let people express their views, to get it out in the open. You make this list. And good facilitation would be at the end, you come back before you close down and say, did we cover, let's go through this list again. Did we cover everything? Is there something missed? Et cetera, et cetera. That's basic facilitation.
Dave, may I ask if Joyce or Paige or Julie would like to comment on this list? Because it's a really interesting list.
Well, okay, for one, this is an aircraft manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And these are all engineers.
Well, that's interesting that they're all very specific to that. They don't have any people in them. They don't have any people emotional issues. It's all very cut and dry.
It is, yeah. Don't you love manufacturing and engineering?
Hey, Julie, in terms of accessibility, what do you see so far in terms of concerns and expectations that you would have expected to see?
I think with accessibility, I think the process is such a small thing in the grand scope of a project that it just gets missed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so,
yeah,
I think that's one of the things that by the time the state, because the city doesn't have a process for it, it's the state that requires it.
mm-hmm.
And so when they go for permitting with the city of Austin, for example, there's literally one line in the whole process that says, have you registered this with the state? And it's a yes or no box. And that's it.
Interesting. Hey,
And
Paige,
so then,
I'm sorry, Julie. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so then, they seem to forget about it. They know they need to do it. They just kind of forget that there's a process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Paige, you do a lot in manufacturing. What do you see?
Yeah, I kind of equate this with a brainstorming step, where you get on the table all the issues that are outstanding and not being addressed, like Julie says.
Mm-hmm.
Thing I noticed immediately about it is there's either 5 or 6 items that have to do with the supplier, so you can really focus in on specific areas of the business that need attention.
Neat is that you began to see how to group them. Joyce, comment, thought?
It's a lot more complicated than what I do.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, Dave. I just was interested because I think that this, even though many of us aren't involved in this, it's a really good example. And I was just curious to see that no one seems to have really talked about people and things, and maybe Anne would like to comment on that since she's the psychologist.
I think that what Dave's outlining is really, as he says, more practical, addressing the ways that the system works. And it's kind of analogous to a situation where you're really looking at the practical needs or the practical possibilities of a situation rather than looking at who cares about whether they get done or not. I mean, in some cases, and I think I've had this experience when I've worked with people who are very scientific and don't have very much interest in connections, social connections, or empathy. They really get very impatient with that, and they don't want to talk about, who gets along with whom, or who's going to be in the hierarchy where, or anything like that. They just want an outline of the productivity and how things are going to be produced. And then there are a lot of different ways this works. Sometimes it comes down to an inherent hierarchy that's in the group already. For the thing that I'm thinking of when I'm talking about this is that I did a workflow analysis at Xerox once, where one of the Xerox has many different corporations, I'm sure you know, all over the country, and one of their work groups was having this terrible time because all the employees kept quitting. So they asked me and several other people in my group to come up and evaluate what was going on. And what was going on, it seemed, was that they had about 7 people who'd been with Xerox for 100 years, and they all considered themselves the boss. And they had like 2 employees. So these 2 employees were getting bossed by 7 bosses, and all of the bosses assumed that they were the only boss. So they were telling the employees all to do different things. So it's like, it reminds me of when I was a kid and I used to
We're
go
going to
visit.
have to stop there just for a minute and let Dave continue. So hang on to the when you were a kid.
All
Dave,
right.
I interrupted you. Go on to your next one, if you will. The rest of
Okay.
the time is basically yours, except for 2 seconds at the end.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my example is from manufacturing because this is where I learned it.
Mhm.
I can understand the idea of using this for other issues, particularly social issues. If you have a big project, the structure's the same. This is like Paige was talking about, this is essentially a brainstorming type session.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we go on, and what I find is that everybody wants to, especially with people issues, they want to talk about the people issues when it's actually a process, a structure, a project that they're working on that they need to concentrate on. So the next thing we do is, this is a lot of fun. These are the 3 questions. I have found this very useful inside and outside of this workshop activity. What is the problem we're here to talk about, to resolve? Why do you consider it a problem? And the last one is, why do you believe it's a problem? You need a solution at all? And usually what I do in this case is I take the 3rd question, put it on a separate page, and get a projector and a computer hooked to it. And I put the 2 questions on the screen, and I go with the group. Now, this is a hostile group, remember. This has got a lot of cross activities. And I say, what is the problem? What are we here to solve? What is this project doing or need to do? And somebody speaks up, and it's usually the first person to speak, I start to type on the screen what it is they're saying, make sure they get the information down. And everybody wants to interrupt and argue the point. And I always make sure that I capture the point accurately from what the person is trying to say. And I do not let go until that person agrees this is what they're saying. And then I come back and says, okay, is this actually, what is the problem, or why do you consider it a problem? And every time it becomes apparent that it is, why do you consider it a problem, not what is the problem? So then I move that text down to the bottom and we do it again. And what we end up with is about 2 or 3, why do you consider it a problem? Because somebody else has got an issue that they want to talk about, and I capture that. And then eventually, about 3 or 4 times into it, pretty soon the entire group can accurately describe what the problem is. And I put something in here so that you know that it's has to do with the cost and price of parts and the supplier and all these other types of things. And inevitably, we get to the 3rd question. And at this point, they're so grateful that they have the why, the symptoms, because why is a symptom. And this is the actual problem. So you're separating the cause from the effect. So why is the effect? And you've actually kind of identified what the problem is. And why do you believe a solution is necessary is usually we skip right by that. This is I found a great opportunity to bring the people together. This is part of creating the intact work group. And then we come down and say, okay, so what are the goals of the project? If we started out with the in the launch section with the sponsor coming in, talking about what it means to the business or to society if we're doing a social issue, or to the community, whatever it is, we can come up with these goals. And we have to identify, I don't allow very many goals. There are 5 here. I try not to do more than that. And then we put some number next to it. And TBD, to be determined, is acceptable because guess what? We didn't have the right people in the room to give us a good number for this goals. But we put something up here. As you can see our reorder lead time, which is ROLT, is we want to get it down to less than 16 weeks. So it's a long process in this, what we're working on here. And then we decide, okay, now that we know the goals, we know the problem, we know the symptoms, we've separated the cause and effect, we know the goals, what are some of the constraints? It's not so much what these numbers are or what this actually says, it's the fact that now that we're a little more focused, what's holding us back? Again, another brainstorm. These are actually a series of convergent and divergent type activities. So this is another convergent, trying to help focus it down. So now we come across the attributes. We have the goals, but we need to put together something that says, what measures are we going to use, or do we think we could use? What activities do we perform that would affect or influence the goals and actually support them? So the group this particular group came up with 6, 2, 4, 6, 7 activity or attributes, and then we put a operational definition next to them. Reoccurring costs. What does reoccurring cost mean? Total manufacturing costs, material labor, measured in dollars per unit. What does ROLT mean? Reorder lead time. And my capitalization. I can see a lot of typos. Anyways, so when we get done with this section, now we have a series of attributes and the definitions. So we have goals with numbers, attributes with definitions. Now the attributes are not necessarily valued all the same. Some are more important than others. So then we use this silly document to write down our attributes in this column here. And then we start to compare them. So if we say, what is reoccurring cost? Which is more important, reoccurring cost or reorder lead time? And they say reoccurring cost. So we put an A right in this first box and we give it a weight factor. What's the relationship? How much more important is it really? We say low. And then we go through, whoops, what happened there? So then we go through, and we don't really want to spend a lot of time going through all of this because it is difficult to understand and get going. But once it starts to move, it moves really fast. So then we count up the scores. So A, if you look across the A column, we got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 A's. All right, and we count them all up. We end up with 41. 41. And then we'll add them to, we'll make them 100%. And then we go back up and assign a percentage on weight. I've never seen this used anywhere else but in here. It's extremely difficult to get rolling and to explain to people, but man, it really works well. So now we have weights. Now we have to do, where are we now? Where's the scale? Let's scale each one of these attributes. So at the top, we have reoccurring costs. We set up an attribute scale of 1 to 10. 1, if you're performing at the number 1 level, the big bosses are going to come down from their mahogany row offices and chew you out, and you may be assigned to a sweeping the floors, type thing. And 10 is they're going to shut the plant down and give you a parade, right? Because you solved this problem. It's a great performing. And then so I usually have them set 1 to 10, and then we have to figure out some, is it a straight line curve? Is it parabolic? Is it, what kind of a curve is the difference between 1 and 10? And then we define where are we today and the red asterisks are like where we are right now. I must have an automatic sender going on. So now we have goals, attribute definitions, weights, and we understand where we are now. And then we can create, and that's how this chart is created. So the weights go around the outside. The red lines is where we are now, or where they are now. And then this is just a table with calculations. If you get into the numbers, you can see we have a weight factor of 100. We had a multiplier of 10 for points. And then we can determine where we are. The current score based on what's going on as this group in this room defined it is 408. And then the target, a good target they figured would be 750. All right, so this gives a project manager a baseline to move forward. As they go forward, any changes, anything that anybody's got a bright idea about doing something different, you can plug it in here and see how that's going to affect all these attributes and hopefully the goals. So just as a recap, we're going to, persuasively convey the project to the business community. So this is something that you're not only do the technical people involved like seeing all this stuff, but also the sponsor of whatever project it is. It's a lot of work, takes 3 days, but the whole idea is to move from a crowd with tools with a team with a method. End of presentation. Any
Thanks,
questions?
Dave. That's wonderful. We only have a few minutes left. I want to give Anne some time to kind of sum up a little bit, and then I just have 2 quick points, and so we may be over just a little bit. And if you need to go, that's fine. Anne, what would you like to add to this? I think this has a lot of application if we simplify it for those of us who are not who are statistically challenged. Anne is not. So.
I think that was a great presentation and great ideas, Dave. And I had the privilege of speaking with Dave about this on the telephone the other day, and we were remarking about how this model could be applied to so many different disciplines, including in my field, where I know Dave made reference to the fire that his neighbor had, but we were talking about how for people who come in to present with post-traumatic stress disorder in my field, this kind of model can be very useful in actually helping people address symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And obviously you wouldn't be doing it in this complicated statistical manner that Dave is doing, and it would be a kind of a one-person endeavor. But I think this model has it has the bones for being applicable to many, many different kinds of projects. So I congratulate Dave on that. I think that's brilliant. And I think you could just go anywhere with this. And I think it's great. It deserves a lot more attention, in my opinion. But I did also, really quickly, since I just have a couple of minutes, I wanted to mention, and one of the ways to sort of subsume this so that one person can use these ideas is that if you're in business by yourself, basically, and you're sort of trying to do this with yourself, you're not really, at the moment anyway, trying to integrate a whole bunch of people. The one thing that you can do is keep a journal in which you combine a to-do list and a calendar and your goals, so that instead of just having a calendar, that you really combine that with the people that you're seeing every day, with the outcome of your meeting with that person, with whether or not that meeting met your goals. And this can be just, and I'm going to talk about this more the next time I present, but this really could lead in even to, if you do this journal every day, this could lead into writing a book about your adventure developing your own business, which these days, with so many people wanting to develop their own business, I think that could be really important. So this would what I hope to do is to provide you with a bunch of questions next time I talk that will give you the framework or format to provide to making yourself this kind of a diary, where you can actually do the kind of things that Dave's saying, but you do it as a one-person endeavor and really just record your own activities so you can see in a systematic way what you're doing and how you're progressing from day to day. And that eventually, after you get a lot of things together and you see where you're going and you see what your outcomes have been and you see what your attempts have been and you see what your failed attempts have been, that this could be really valuable once you get a bunch of time under your belt with this, could be really valuable as a book. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's a really great idea, and I'd love to talk about it some more as a kind of a facilitation of communication with yourself, because I think that's overlooked, and I think that people need to learn more about how to communicate with themselves effectively, especially if they're starting their own business and they need to keep track of where they're going.
Excellent points, Anne. Thank you. And Dave, wonderful ideas. And I think I particularly like the constraints, because sometimes we get so excited about an opportunity, we forget about the constraints.